Hello, welcome to this panel on impact film. It was important for us to deal with this subject this year because last year we launched the Cinema Green Lab. Cinema Green Lab was about how a festival also can behave. We know that we have a negative impact, but we know also we can inspire people and also have talks and discussion to have a positive impact or to encourage a positive impact the industry can get. Last year we talked about eco-friendly shooting. We talked about we are thinking of doing a green charter for festivals. Our creators can also do inspiring movies. This year we've done a special focus on called Moving Mountains. The idea was to have a selection of films also dealing with those topics, environmental issues, but also how to live together, more diversity, have more diversity. And to go further, the idea is this panel is really to think about how the industry can also be involved on those topics. So we organize it once again. Melanie Goodfellow from Screen International will moderate this panel. We have 3 panelists with us. Thanks to them to come to our little studio, like it's a bit like Les Arcs, and 2 other panelists are on Zoom. Thank you, and I let Mélanie introduce you to the panel. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Melanie Goodfellow, and I work for Screen International. I cover Europe and the Middle East for the magazine. I'd like to welcome you to this talk, which is part of Les Arcs industry program. Normally, we'd be sitting in the mountains and hopefully going off to get a sneaky ski after these talks, or maybe sharing a fondue somewhere, a bit of après ski. But unfortunately, this year we're all in our respective homes, and 3 of us are in the studio. But I think the discussion is going to be interesting, nonetheless. The headline for the talk is Era of Change, and what the film industry can do to support change in a world which is trying to become more green and more diversified. Obviously, over the last few years, we've seen movements like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, the climate change movement, and people are moving in a direction where they want to create what they see as a better world. I think in the film industry, we all see ourselves as progressives, lots of us, and we feel that we're part of that. But what can the film industry really do to support change and to raise awareness about these issues, and ensure that there's more representation of all people, whatever their sexuality, their origin, their color, their gender, and also what we can do also to raise awareness about the future of this planet from an environmental point of view. So today we have 5 figures who are playing their part through different initiatives. 3 of them are in the studio. I'll introduce them first. We have Olivier Sabi, who is the founder of Impact Film and Observatoire des Images, which are 2 initiatives aimed at raising awareness about diversity and also supporting films made by diverse filmmakers and featuring diverse stories. Then we have Carole Baraton, who is one of the founders of Paris-based sales agent Charades, which has an incredibly eclectic slate of films, and she will be talking about some of the initiatives and partnerships she has. The company has sold quite a few films which feature different stories from different parts of the world, and also highlight issues that are on our minds at the moment. Then I have Jean-François Camilleri, who is the former head of Disney France, who now works as the president of Echo Studio, which is a company that was set up to create films that shine a light on issues that we're all looking at in today's world. And then Manon Ardisson, who's I think is sitting in Normandy, normally based in London, who is the founder of Ardisson UK, and you did God's Own Country, which was at the time was quite groundbreaking, and also you recently launched a new fund called Mother Tongue, the Mother Tongue Award, Development Award, and you're going to talk a bit about like that. And then we also have Rory Thost, who's the creative executive at Participant Media, who specialized in documentary at the company. who's sitting in Los Angeles. So I think it's a little bit earlier in the day for you. So thank you for joining us. And it's great to have a perspective from the US, because obviously Participant Media was one of the first companies to be launched with the idea of making films that with an impact. So it's great to have you all here. So to start with, I'd just like everybody just to talk a little bit about their companies and what they're trying to do, because I think you're all very different in terms of how you're approaching this, and people in different territories might not necessarily be aware of your different initiatives. So Jean-François, could you just tell us a little bit about Echo Studio, because obviously you came from a Disney France background, so I was really intrigued by this idea that you then went into this company with this focus on impact films.
Yeah, well, when I was at Disney, I had the chance to distribute a lot of big movies, big tentpole films, the Marvel ones, the Lucas films, Disney, Pixar, obviously. But I always wanted to work with French producers, French directors, and especially on the documentary side. And it started back in 2005 with March of the Penguins, which got an incredible success. And then we carried on working with Luc Jacquet on other environmental driven movies, but also other directors like Gilles Demestre or Pascal Plisson on My Way to School, movies about education. And I really realized that thanks to those movies, we could really make a difference. We could help people learn about an issue or subject and then get to know more about it. In the meantime, when I was at Disney, I created Disney Nature, which was aimed at producing once a year a big environmental film for the big screen. And thanks to all those things I did, I really wanted to go much further, and a little bit like Participant Media has been doing with a lot of success for the past 17 years, try to create a studio which would help authors, directors, producers to make those movies, whether it's for TV, whether it's for SVOD platforms, whether it's for the big screen, obviously, but to ensure them to be able to make those films, whether it's on human rights, access to education, environmental issues, make sure that those films won't be just movies, but also a tool to help NGOs, to help foundations, to help institutions to incite people to go further. And our baseline is inspiring change, and our goal is really to make those films and inspire people to make a change in the world we live in today.
So could you just mention a couple of the projects you've already done and a couple that are in development, just to give people a flavor of what you're doing?
Yeah, we did a documentary last year which was called Tomorrow Belongs to Us, a French one following kids around the world doing incredible things for their local communities, which we worked on with Carole here. Another one called Buoyancy, which was a fiction film from a first-time director coming from Australia. Very powerful art house film on human slavery taking place in Thailand and Cambodia. And we are developing many movies. We have more than 20 projects as we speak, coming from all over the world. One of them being Once Upon a Time in Africa, which is a very ambitious film taking place in Kenya in English language, inspired by a true story, telling the story of a kid who used to be a poacher and who will become a ranger at the end of his life. And other films, we are developing a movie called Our Girls, telling the incredible story of those girls who have been kidnapped by Boko Haram in April 2014. We are making a movie on autism, another one on a French football player, a woman French football player coming from Afghanistan who has an incredible life, and many other with first time with AAA French directors and also international companies.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Well, you mentioned Participant Media as being sort of not a model exactly for what you're doing, but an inspiration. So maybe Rory can talk a little bit about Participant. As you said before, when we were talking before, you're more on the documentary side, but you can give us a sort of a general overview of the company and what you're trying to achieve too.
I can. Well, thank you, Jean-François. That's those are very nice, kind words. I've only worked at the company for around 6 years, but we have obviously been around since 2004. Started by social entrepreneur Jeff Skoll, and very similar to Echo Film, with the idea that a well-told story, a compelling piece of content, can really push, hearts and minds, and can really be used as tools for change. And so in our time, we have produced more than, I would like to say, 100 narrative and documentary feature films. So those include Spotlight, Alfonso Cuarón's Roma, and more recently, obviously here in the States, we've been laser focused on democracy and voting rights. And so we started off the year with a film on political gerrymandering called Slay the Dragon. And then more recently, John Lewis Good Trouble, which focuses on the late congressman. And so in addition to producing these films, obviously, there's a drive to use the films as tools. And so we have a very robust impact team that after the film is done and secured distribution, their goal is to get the film in the hands of those that are doing the work on the ground. We don't pretend to be experts in every single issue on education, on the climate crisis, and so forth. But there are people that have been doing this work for decades. And so that's kind of our second, tier of work, is making sure that the films are seen by as many people as possible.
That's interesting. I'd like to go back to that as well later on in the discussion about how these films can make an impact and whether they need a special way of distribution or a special push. It'd be interesting to know. Manon, in my introduction I referred to you as Ardisson UK, Ardimages UK. So I was just interested if you could tell us a little bit about your history, and I'm just really intrigued. I mean, I know you did. You started out very young, getting into production, and you cut your teeth in different production companies. And I was wondering what made you say, right, I'm going to start making films with a different focus, a different edge. And obviously you made God's Own Country, and now we look at that, we see it as just part of the the filmography of the last 4 or 5 years. But I guess at the time it was more complicated. So can you just tell us a little bit about that and about your company and what you're trying to achieve?
Yes, absolutely. Well, so when I produced God's Own Country, I hadn't even set up my company yet. I was still working for Paul Webster in the UK. And I was in development on a project with iFeatures, which is a brilliant initiative from the BFI, BBC and Creative England. And I came to the project very much with impact in mind, because I had studied LGBTQ representation and I felt very passionate about the subject matter. And one of the things that stuck with me was that as a queer kid growing up in a heteronormative society, a lot of your role models come from the media, come from culture. And most films that I was watching at the time that had a gay central relationship ended up with one of the characters often committing suicide, or the characters not being able to stay together. Even in a beautiful film like Weekend that I absolutely loved, there was not like a story that was telling you, you know what, you're gay and you're going to have this wonderful romance and you're going to find someone you're going to have great sex with and a great love story. And that's very much why I fell in love with the project when the director, Francis Lee, first pitched it to me, and then we developed it together. And at the time, it was considered like too much of a niche film for a lot of financiers, but we were really lucky to have the support of the BFI and Creative England. And my old boss, Paul Webster, also did the tax credit for us. So we were very supported by the UK public funding for that film. And then you had the impact that it had. And I was so happy to see the reaction on social media of people, of it doing very much what I was hoping it would do, of like people being like, oh yeah, I love this story. It spoke to me. I recognize myself, because that's what I wanted to achieve. I wanted like queer teenagers to watch this film and believe that they were going to find someone special and have a beautiful relationship. And then on the back of the film doing so well, I set up Ardimages UK. And this year, and we've been developing a range of projects both in film and TV. And I've got to be honest that I try to do like more mainstream commercial things, but my heart is just not in it. And it's not that I specifically want to do diversity just for like, I don't know, for any secondary reason. It's just that those are the projects that speak to me, because it's the projects that are close to my life, you know, like talking about ethnic diversity, immigration, sexuality, gender, disabilities. These are just more reflective of my actual life experience, and I think that's why most people now engaged with this content a lot more, because it's actually truer to life. I think it's about making films more reflective about what's actually happening. And this year we were very lucky with my business partner Chiara to receive a Vision Award from the BFI to continue expanding our company over the next 2 years and prioritizing female-driven stories, because, you know, women are not a minority. We're 51% of the population, but somehow only 20% of the biggest films are still directed by women. And so obviously working on that, and then on diversity just generally, just from the stories that I like. And this year we also launched a new initiative supported by Charades, that is Ardimages UK and Shudder Films, which is the production company of Jack Darling, my producing partner on God's Own Country. We wanted to team up again, and we were looking for a project to do together. And then Jack actually came with the idea of not doing a single project, but doing some sort of development fund, with the purpose of finding feature films that are set in the UK, but in which the story is in a language other than English. And this is a really interesting proposition, because when you open the door to language diversity, you have a whole range of other diversity that comes in, right? You have obviously the immigration languages like French or Punjabi or Mandarin, you know, and this is one side, but you also have the local languages like Welsh or Irish or Scots Gaelic. You also have a British Sign Language, and it just kind of, you know, opened this door to so many interesting stories. And again, a bit like God's Own Country, when we had the idea, we developed how it was going to work, and then we approached some more traditional soft funding bodies, and there was a concern around whether those projects would have market appeal in terms of sales and distribution. And so we took that feedback, and we decided, okay, fine, let's approach distributors and sales agents, see what they think. I mean, we were working on setting this up just after Parasite had won Best Picture, so that was obviously a big help. But the response from sales and distribution was really positive. You know, like people felt that there was a potential in this beyond the moral and ethical motivation. Also, like the audiences exist, are real. There are 300 languages spoken in the UK. They're never on screen, you know. And actually, you know, with the support of Curzon and Charades, we were able to set up the scheme, and we didn't need any other partner. We ran it for the first time. We had an open call the whole of November. And we are assessing at the moment. We had over 100 submissions from people that I'm really excited about, and we're going to be announcing the shortlist in March, hopefully. So yeah, it's all going really well, and very grateful to Charades for their support. I know Carole is here too.
So I'm going to come to Carole at the very end, because I feel like she's part of the glue in this. I think. So I was just going to I wanted to find out from Olivier Sabi. You're perhaps the person I know least on this panel, and I just wanted to find out about your initiative, Impact Film, and then I think there's a new initiative you have called the Observatoire des Images, which are two separate things. Can you just explain a little bit what both initiatives are?
It's definitely two different things, but very linked. Impact has been founded about 2 years ago, and the idea is a small investment structure that is supporting two types of movies. The movies that produce Jean-François, that are call to action and that focus on one topic. And the movies are very interested in what Manon said about the fact that it's also very interesting to produce movies that are not focused on the topic, but that, for instance, with LGBTQ, that are normal people, normal characters, and that you don't focus on this topic. So Impact has been founded to work on 3 different topics. First, diversity, then the role of women in society, and then the climate change and climate transition. So we co-produce movies like Papisha, like My Favorite Clothes, about wedding in Syria, Lanka, which was at the Mostra. So it's been 2 years that we are operating, and we do those 2 kind of investment, either in movies that deal about those topics, or either we work on the script with the team to erase the stereotypes and to place causes. Like people are placing products, but we don't place a bottle of Coca-Cola. We place causes, like we place a woman that is having a big role in the movie and that will be able to be a role model for people, for viewers. So this is what we do with Impact. We try to fight against stereotypes, and we try to place causes to call for action. This is Impact. That has been operated for 2 years. But then we thought we were a bit like alone to work on the influence of images. So we decided to launch a small structure with all the people interested in this kind of topic. So you're all welcome to join us. And it's called l'Observatoire des Images. It's a small structure in which we want to produce studies and research about the influence of images, because we all work on producing images, either in cinema, television, or also in advertising. But there are not so many researches in France. There are some in the US. Maybe we can talk about it in the US. But the research is very rare. So we decided to launch this small structure. And we are publishing every month a small study of 2 pages about the influence of images. So for instance, we publish a first one about diversity in TV shows in France. It's a 2 pages one. And the other one is about an example of placing causes in a very big TV show in France called Plus belle la vie, that try to create new characters in the series and then study the impact of changing the characters and the topic that the characters are facing. We were inspired by a study that has been made in the 90s on the TV show, the American TV show ER, in which they decided to change one of the show and to have someone that was suffering from alcoholism to come to the emergency room with George Clooney, and George Clooney decided to explain to this character that it was a disease and that you have to be treated against alcoholism. And then there was a study showing that more people that watch the TV show were able to help relatives that were facing problems with alcohol. So the idea of the Observatoire des Images is really to produce those research about how images can influence viewers and the life of viewers.
So just to understand, so with film impact films, people will come to you with their script. I don't know whether you worked on Papicha, for example, that there's all 5 female characters in the film, and you would look at the script and say, well, that's a bit not quite right, or I mean, and directors will take that advice from you. Is that what you're saying? It's just very interesting.
So Papisha is the first type of investment. It already deals with the topic that we want to support, because it's about diversity, it's about women, it's about fight for freedom. So we didn't change anything on Papisha. But then we have producers or directors calling us because, hey, they need money. We are an activist fund, and we really are. Like we say, we can help you produce this movie, but there is no way we will produce a movie that doesn't fight against stereotypes, that will, again, go on those stereotypes. So if you want us to invest in your movie, then you have to erase the fact that all the women are second characters that will stay in kitchen. So it's up to you. You can still produce your movie without us. But if you want us in, if you want our money, if you want the money of our investors, then you have to fight against the stereotypes. So we can help you rewrite your scenario. We are connecting investors that are interested in those topics and producers who need money. Some are very interested in the topics already. Some are not, but that's why we are an activist fund. They will decide to go on to create new a new era of their movies to be sure that they will influence people, and so then we can co-produce.
Okay, so that's very interesting. I've just never heard of something like that before, so it's a very interesting move.
I guess we are the only one doing this cause placement instead of product placement.
That's very interesting. And then how can people write? But how would they contribute to your site if they wanted to get involved?
So we're very fresh because we only launched 3 weeks ago. So you go on observatoiredesimages.org, and I'm sorry, it's only in French for now. And then we are gathering all the energies now, and those 2 studies that we have here are from partners of us, and we have another one that we will publish next week about how Buffy, if you remember Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, the TV show, how Buffy changed the way Hollywood see blonde female girl. Instead of killing them in some dark streets, she is here to save the world. And there have been a lot of studies about how Buffy was the first character to change the mindset of Hollywood towards blonde female women. So we have a new study that we will publish next week, and this has been written by our partners. So if you want to partner with us, just come, just join. And we are very happy that Les Arcs Film Festival is a partner since the beginning of the Laboratoire des Images, and everything has to be built now. Impact partners decided to create this Laboratoire des Images, but now it's up to us to gather and to find how we can work together.
Okay, thank you. So Carole, I don't mean to come to you last, because obviously you're one of the most important pieces of the puzzle, because if these films don't get sold to distributors or shown online somewhere, they need to be shown, they need to be seen. So I'm just really intrigued about how you see this as a sales agent. I mean, you've got years of experience and you've sold big films and you're very successful as a sales agent. So is this a personal decision or a financial decision, or it's just because this is the world we live in terms of having this diversity?
So first, I want to say I'm the less legitimate person in that panel, because we are a sales agent, so what we want to do is selling. And I'm talking to all these people around me. They all have a really precise mission of the voice, the loud voice they want to spread. And we just didn't have that special mission when we started the company. Like, okay, how do we launch a new sales agency, which is like just not another one? And how do we actually live out of it, And we started to read material and had we worked on numbers, as everybody does when you start a company, which is, has to put food in your plate. And we started to read materials, and the first movie we acquired was Revenge, which was a female director rape and revenge, as we say, movie. And then the movie was released at the time of the Weinstein big clash, and the movie became one of the loud voices, exactly, but totally coincidentally. So I don't want to play like the modest one, but I guess we found out while we started to ride our bike, which is our Charades bike, that our taste was to movies with an impact or with different voices. And I just found out preparing that panel, I watched on my lineup from the beginning, and it's now after 4 years between 50 and 60 movies. To be honest, I didn't really do the recount, and we have 1/3 of movies directed by women, and I was like, wow, not too bad, without having this obligation, and it's not at all a reflection of the numbers of movies made by women or in competition in festivals by women nowadays. And we did that without having any quotas, imposing any quotas to ourselves. So we were like, quite, wow, this is great. So I guess what I mean to say is that what I mean to say here is that I think you get excited on projects when there is some purpose to it, or when there is some voice that, like either new voices or different voices supporting their own project. And as a matter of fact, and luckily, unfortunately, nowadays these projects are the ones that we are all talking about now, which are new voices, movies with an impact, which is what will bring emotion at the end of the day to the audience. I'm not saying that all the movies we've been doing with an impact is the ones which we think are going to be the most commercially successful. And it's not why we are doing them, but it's because I guess it is important. It just seems like obvious. Some of those, like when we did Buoyancy, for example, together, when I met with the producer, an Australian producer who's very talented, I said like, wow, this is probably unsellable, but I'd like to sell that film, So, and she said, okay, let's do it together. That was as simple as that. And we're still here. We're still alive and we're still selling movies. So I guess, yeah, there is at the end of the road, without doing it consciously, we're finding out that there is a real path for those projects now, and a real appetite from the audience on just different projects, and projects just like not silly projects, films.
Because I was wondering, and I want to talk to Rory because I'll get some of his insight too. But I was wondering whether there was more. In fact, I'll put this question to Rory because we talked about this. I mean, I was wondering how you find your subject matter. I mean, I asked you this question, but you can reply to it again. Like, are you combing through New Yorker magazines looking for the issues of the day, or is it people coming to you? And clearly, a lot of your films, like RBG or 3.5 Minutes, are incredibly timely. And is that just because you're in the zeitgeist, or is it because you're taking these calculated ideas about what you think people are going to be talking about? And how does it work for you on the documentary side, at least?
Mm-hmm. I want to say it's not as prescriptive. It's a more organic process. We rely on filmmakers to come to us with projects because we're very filmmaker forward. We believe they are the ones that can see around the curve of these images, of these issues, I should say. So if you start a film with the hope that it will come out 2-3 years later, especially in the documentary world, it's incredibly important that film is still relevant to audiences globally. And so we've found in the way we work, it's a much more collaborative and interesting process when filmmakers come to us with the access, with the stories, with those characters that they've already, they're already so well acquainted with. Occasionally we will look at an article, we'll do an option, we'll attach a filmmaker, but that's very rare. Most of the time it's kind of mining the filmmaker community and having them come to us with a project that's almost ready to go, and then we're there to provide the support to push them into production. Because again, we've just been fortunate that these films are hitting the zeitgeist when they need to hit. And so I mentioned democracy. We had so many on our slate back in 2018, and we had really no idea how relevant they would be to the election, to the tampering of our voting rights. I mean, and then they came out in a way that felt really organic and really gratifying.
And I mean, clearly these documentaries have ended up being incredibly timely, but sometimes films can end up dealing with an issue. I mean, at least, up until now, where people aren't so interested. So what do your teams do? You're talking about actually sort of organic, actually sort of making impact. And what do the teams do? Are they going to communities, or are they just making sure you get the best deal for them? How are you getting those films out there? Are there any particular paths they're taking, or is it different on a case-by-case basis?
It's different on a case-by-case basis. I mean, here in the United States, there's certainly not as much support in terms of softening. I mean, there are amazing organizations that are supporting documentaries, but we really believe in fully supporting them from a financial aspects so that they can go off and make their film in kind of an insular fashion and not have to present it to the world until it's ready to go. And so historically, and excuse me if I'm not understanding your question exactly, but historically we've looked to film festivals as our launch pads. And from there, that's when we start to build out a sales strategy and enlist the help of sales agents and use that platform to build momentum and hopefully gauge interest from distributors. And I know we were talking about this earlier, but there are more and more distributors in this game, which of course makes it competitive, but also makes it more viable in that these stories will be seen on a larger scale, especially with the Netflixes of the world, especially the other streamers. I mean, I do think that they are very additive because we want these stories to not just be US centric, we want them to be global.
Well, actually, that point actually brings me to a point that we did discuss and we wanted to discuss, because you are also working in Europe. You're not only based in the US. Can you talk a little bit about that, and like the fact that participant wants to have European partners too, doesn't want to only be focused on the US?
Yeah, we do, and I know I sound like a broken record, but when we were founded, it was important that these stories were not US centric. Obviously in like RBG, for example, she's an incredible American figure, but especially in the last few years, I've seen us pushing more into the international space and becoming involved with more European co-productions. So we had Victor Kazakovsky's Aquarella, which premiered at Venice. We had Ai Weiwei's Human Flow. We have another few projects coming up that are European co-productions, and it's just to iterate that these stories, they can transcend nations and borders. I mean, so for example, we co-acquired with Magnolia here in the States, Alexander Nanau's Collective, which is based in Bucharest, which is a story about government accountability and corruption in Romania. But that's so resonant to audiences here. I mean, clearly the past 4 years have taught us this, with this presidency, is these stories don't have to take place in the United States to enact change. So we're using that film here to talk to American audiences, again, about journalism, the importance of a free press, about government accountability, and so forth.
Jean-François, I wanted to pose the same question to you, because obviously you had very strong ties already with a number of the people you're working with at Echo. But how else are you finding stories for Echo Studio? Are you seeing an issue that you want to cover, or is it because the directors are coming to you with a project?
Well, it can be both. We have directors and filmmakers coming to us with projects. Sometimes subjects we didn't know anything about, and we are discovering them and finding them very interesting and very important to cover. And sometimes we read something or we see something and we think that there might be something to do about it, or ideas we could have on other important subjects that are very, very, very important to our heart. It could be also finding a director who has a lot of potential and qualities, and discussing with him what type of impact content he could be happy to work on. So we are trying to stay as open as we can. I don't want to be only in a position of waiting for projects to come to us, because there are things we really want to talk about. So we need to go toward them as well. So it's a little bit of both, and the idea is really to cover as much as we can, with always, of course, high quality producers, directors, script writers. But it could come from, going back to buoyancy, it's not an idea we would have had, but when Carole came to us with this project, we kind of discovered it and really thought that it was very important to do something about it, even if it was not sellable.
And we did sell it in June.
Yeah.
And in France, is this a relatively new space? I mean, you have got a long tradition of great sort of fantastic nature, natural history documentaries and like you say, education documentaries. But is it making films which are specifically sort of impact? Do you feel like you're the first one to do this, or do you feel like you're following in a tradition?
No, there have been a big tradition of impact films, whether it's political films, whether it's on environment or other subjects. Well, the big thing in the past 2-3 years that we have been able to put a name on it in a marketing way. Now it's called impact, and impact is used every single day on a lot of content, which is good because it and everything Olivier is doing with the Observatoire goes in this direction as well. It's becoming visible, more visible, and we can put names on it. But yeah, I mean, I think that French directors from the very first day have been in a way impact directors, impact filmmakers for a lot of them. So if you take nature and environment, in the mid-50s, Cousteau got a Palme d'Or in Cannes for something which we shouldn't watch today because actually doesn't. I mean, we wouldn't be able to talk about the ocean as he talked about it 60 years ago. But yeah, I mean, it goes back a long time. It goes back a long time, and I think that the French filmmaker has been very strong and very useful on all those projects, on all those subjects. But again, I mean, also in other countries, obviously. So yeah, I've been working a lot with UK producers coming from the BBC, Alistair Fothergill, Keith Colley, Paul Webster, all those people. Yeah, I mean, without even having the name impact on their movies back in the 80s or the 90s, well, they were actually doing impact.
So it's not. It is new, but it's not new in a way.
No, I think talking about it is new. I think we have more and more movies. If you look at the French box office back in 2019, 2 years ago, the number of fiction films which were impact movies is amazing. I could give the title of them in French, but Hors Normes, Au nom de la terre, Invisible, Misérable, Papicha, all those movies which got huge success were impact movies, and but now we there is a genre existing which might not have been the case before 2015, I would say.
Yeah. So looking to the future, like the situation we're in now, do you think that the thing that we're talking about now, like diversity and environment, will these just be the norm in the future? I mean, I look at my children who are 14 and 15, and their expectation is that there will be people of all types of sexuality in any rom-com or not anything they watch, and they can't stand it if the hero is a man. I mean, they just expect it to be the norm now. Do you think this will just become our norm, and so these films won't be impact films? I mean, starting with you, Manon, I don't know. What do you feel?
Well, I mean, I'm working towards it. I would say that I think that it's going to be more democratized, and that it's great that I think younger generations are a lot more open already and thinking about these issues a lot. But what I always try to do is to think about who is not getting representation, because of course it's great that people are thinking about sexuality and gender in a way that, you know, a gay love story is a lot more accessible now than it was 10 years ago. But you have to think also about disability. You also have to think about intersectionality of diversity, you know, like Black women, bringing, you know, I think there is always a danger with a norm, personally. And I kind of feel quite passionate about, of course, promoting diversity, but also keeping an eye on what is not being talked about.
And Rory, what I mean, from the point of view of participant, I mean, are there subjects or issues that you think at the moment? I mean, I know you said you don't go and look for an issue and then look for a film, but are there any particular topics or issues that you have on your list that you're thinking about as a team, thinking we must make sure we look at these, or can you give us a taster of things that have been announced that we're going to be seeing in the next 12 months, 18 months on our screens, you know, from participant?
I think, well, I mean, first to back up, the documentary form, you know, inherently you know, from its kind of onset is a colonialist, you know, structure. And I think we've come so far in the form is already evolved, and I think it will continue, especially the way we look at filmmaker and subject, and the way they can kind of really. We work with Steve James a lot, who's an American documentary filmmaker, and he thinks it always makes the material richer when the subjects are collaborative, with his process. And so I just think moving forward, I feel that filmmakers will hopefully adopt that more, because it can only make the process smoother and more representative. In terms of looking ahead, we do have a film called Final Account that premiered at Venice that looks at everyday perpetrators within the Third Reich. And so that's obviously a film that is looking back, but then at the same time looking forward, of how we as citizens every day perpetuate stereotypes, how we lift up fascism in everyday actions. And so I mean, it's pretty broad, I understand, but I do think that it's an issue that we all need to continue to examine, is how our everyday humanity infringes on other freedoms.
It's very interesting, yeah. So Olivier, could you sort of give me a sense of how you feel about how easy it is to get finance for these sorts of projects? I mean, are you finding it easier to find investors in the projects that are coming to you, or is it still hard to source money for?
Well, it's not easy, but we knew about it. Most of the time, people think that what we do is too political. And my answer most of the time is that, yes, producing movies is political anyhow. But this is what I want them to understand, and that's what we are working on with the Laboratoire des Images towards producers, is that even if you don't want to do a political movie, producing images is political, because the people you choose, the topic you choose is political. So, for instance, when I have producers sending me a script and asking if we can finance, and I'm replying, I'm sorry, but are you racist? And I'm like, no, why? I said, because I just read your script and the only colored people is cleaning the floor again. So what about changing that? And what about having a lawyer who's black? It's maybe mostly the case in the US, but not in French movies. People, black color, most of the time are cleaning floors on French movies. So that's what we are working on. It's like producing is anyhow political. So it's not easy to find investors because they want to produce movies because they think it's important and interesting to produce movies. But when it comes to produce movies about colored people, when it comes about prostitution, when it comes about slavery, it's not that easy. But hopefully we find some. So we're working with private investors and mostly big French families and European families.
Okay. So far, not so many sort of, what would you say, commercial sources of funding coming in yet. Yeah. So I think we've had a really interesting discussion, and I've really learned a lot about all the different initiatives that you're working on. And so I just wanted to ask you a very quick question, just to wrap it up, in terms of improving films which are looking at have a diverse cast or a story, and also or are looking at the world and the environment. I mean, what is the thing you want to achieve in that space in the next 18 months? What are you looking at? What's your key objective? So I'll start with you, Manon.
Well, I've got key objectives that are practical about running the scheme, announcing the winners, producing films. But I think something that I've been really thinking about and that I want to do more this year is just to really listen to the diverse filmmakers that I'm talking to and empower them to tell the stories the way they want to tell them. Because I feel that, especially as a privileged white person, it's important to try and train yourself to be aware of your unconscious bias that you have, that we're just talking about. You would write someone cleaning the floor as a black person because that's your assumption, but just questions all these questions. Listen to actual black writers, black directors, diverse people from other diversity backgrounds, and to really also think about how the way the stories they want to tell, how they can be told differently from the usual formula that we are used to, like the 5-act structure that comes from like the European culture, sure, but like are there any other ways of stories? How can we tell stories that are diverse in the way they're told by people who tell them, and really empower those people and not force them to be put in the boxes that we know? So yeah, I think unconscious bias training is really key.
Okay. Jean-François, you might have different objectives, but what is, in terms of your company and what you're trying to achieve as a company that supports impact films, what is your objective or something you really want to achieve in the next year?
Well, in the next few months, we have a very important movie coming out for us about access to water, called Walking on Water, from Aïssa Maïga. It's the first time she's directing a movie. She's a French actress, but the first time she's directing a movie we shot in Niger under very hard conditions. So it's a very important film for us. It's a very important film for her, and it's a very important film for impact. But in general, I think the most important thing for me and for us at Eco Studio is to find the best way to talk to the 15, 30 years old people, because we have a lot of filmmakers who are extremely talented, but usually when it comes to impact, when it comes to talking about the subjects, it's rare to find filmmakers who are young and who have all the tools to speak to the younger audience, and this is absolutely key. It's easy to make. It's easy is not the. It's not the word, but it's easier to make documentaries, art house documentaries, talking to people who are extremely well educated and have enough purchase power to go to see movies or to have multiple subscription to streamers, but talking to the 15, 30 years old with their language on very important issues is absolutely key. So our goal is to find the next filmmakers, the next writers, the next actors who will be able to talk to those people.
That's interesting. Okay. And Carole, you were being very modest in saying that you were the person who shouldn't be here, but in terms of as a sales agent, in terms of your place in the world and in this ecosystem, do you have any goals in this area?
Actually, we're working on a movie now. I'm going to what I'm going to say is going to mix what Manon and Jean-François just pointed, because we're working on that movie of a French director called Louis-Julien Petit, who did Les Invisibles, was about a foyer of homeless women in France and was very successful. Not only locally, it did more than 1 million admission in France, but we sold it really well. And we're doing his next film, which is called The Kitchen Brigade. And it's about a chef, women, who's starting a cook school in a migrant foyer, a shelter, and it's actually, as Les Invisibles was a very important movie, a movie with a mission, a movie with a goal and an impact, and it's in the meantime a very entertaining movie. And I guess we're not going to look only for that, because you can have some subject matters which you can't really avoid to be a shock for the audience or something super bleak, and it has to be like that. But I guess addressing a wider audience, as Jean-François was just pointing out, or making those movies not only movies with an impact, but just telling a story, and through that story entertaining people and telling a banal story or an everyday life story with those elements which can, people don't feel like they're taught a lesson when they're going to cinema, is material we'd love to do more, for sure.
And this is what we call engagetainment, entertainment and engagement, which is exactly what Carole is saying. We need to entertain people in order to bring messages across.
And Olivier?
Same question, you mean?
Sorry, I'll say it again. No, but just, for the next 12 months, is there one thing you think at the end of 2021, goodness knows what it's going to throw at us,
Well,
you want to have achieved?
with Impact, we're going to co-produce 5 documentaries because we've been only producing features yet, so we will produce 5 documentaries. I totally agree with Jean-François. The thing is that it's more easy to convince people that are already convinced. Like people who watch documentaries about LGBTQ, most of the time they are not against gay people. So the idea is how we can reach those people that are not convinced yet. And with the Observatoire des Images, that as you understood, it's a very fresh project. I hope that we can develop data, tools, studies to help the industry to have impact and to create images that might engage people.
And then Rory, sorry to put you on the spot as the last person to answer, so you've got to say something highly meaningful. Now, so as you entering into a new era of US life, what are you hoping? I mean, clearly you're part of a team, but what are sort of your goals for the next 12 months for this year?
Well, obviously there's the practical options, but I'll go with the ideological because I think that's more important, especially as we enter a new era. Specifically here in the United States, using documentary as a nonpartisan form. I mean, documentary is seen by many people as partisan, as one-sided, and I think that is short-sighted. And so I think, especially as we come off of 4 years of where fact was not actually seen as fact, it's important to kind of reinstill confidence that these stories are real and about real individuals with real struggles and possibilities, and building off what everyone has said, reaching audiences that these stories would not normally reach. And so, yeah, it's a big feat, but it's possible.
Well, look, thank you, everybody. It's been a really pleasure. It was a pleasure to speak to you all. The days are a little bit dark, at least in Europe at the moment, with the early nights and just what's happening with the pandemic. So this has been a really uplifting talk and quite inspirational, and given me some food for thought. And hopefully the people who are going to watch this talk, some food for thought too, and something to sort of work towards as we're all sitting at home developing projects and thinking about the future. So thank you so much for spending the time to tell us about what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.